Now let's get talking. In a bid to enable a better service delivery for electricity consumers, ensure right protections, and how consumers can get better value for money, the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC. The agencies expect this to also result in better protection of the rights of electricity consumers. The agreement also includes electricity consumers knowing and insisting on their rights while helping the operators deliver better services. The FCCPC and NERC have been working together over the last 2 years in areas of consumer protection. This renewed collaboration between the two agencies is to prevent the two agencies from working at cross purposes.
By signing this memorandum of understanding,
the more we resolve complaints, the more there are complaints. And that's good and bad. That people are complaining a lot more now is actually an indication of a vibrant resolution mechanism and confidence in that mechanism. However, that's the good side. The bad side is that we still continue to have repeated complaints about the same issues. Shows that there are some key structural modifications to how the businesses operate and how the sector delivers its services.
We have worked collaboratively, worked very closely with FCCPC in the area of consumer protection. So what we had today, signing of the MoU, has been to consolidate this area of cooperation between our two agencies. When you have two agencies in charge of consumer protection and so on, the usual attitude would be to be competing against each other. We have decided to collaborate for the same purpose of protecting consumers.
Well, let's now join the Executive Vice Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Federal Competition and Consumers Protection Commission, Mr. Babatunde Irukera, live from our Abuja studios to give us better understanding of this agreement. Good afternoon. It's good to see you, sir. All right, tell us more about this MoU between NERC and, of course, the FCCPC.
Thank you for inviting me and focusing on what I consider one of the more important issues with dealing with the consumers in perhaps the largest consumer service and utility in Nigeria. And what the MoU does is to expand and formalize what has been a working relationship for some years and to ensure that the protection for consumers is a lot more robust. The key features that will be of interest to consumers is a more robust complaint resolution platform and greater information exchange between the two agencies and some additional platforms to discuss what are some of the more applicable or best solutions to the structural issues in the industry.
Moving on now, I want to really see how practical this will be. We've had issues around estimated billings, metering. These are the general issues, over billings and all of that. So in specifics, how will this handshake help address all of this?
Good. When a few years ago there was a requirement to consider what is a more reflective tariff, and one of the safeguards that the NERC pursued and succeeded in at the time was estimated billing regulation that broke the consumers into the different bands and the caps on the nature of the estimated bills they should receive. We continue to receive complaints that suggest that the DISCOs are not complying with the spirit and the fullest terms of this regulation. And we're hopeful that this MoU would be a platform for stronger enforcement of that and imposition of appropriate penalty when DISCOs do not comply.
I'm also trying to understand where the job of maybe FCCPC will start and stop, and where NERC takes over, maybe when it has to do with implementation of the resolutions reached after discussions with FCCPC? Can we get some clarity around that?
Good. So for instance, the estimated billing cap is an NERC regulation, and primary enforcement capabilities are in the NERC, although to a limited extent, the FCCPC by law is empowered to enforce other enactments for the protection of consumers and for the promotion of competition. But primary enforcement capabilities of technical regulations such as estimated billing and billing caps rest with the NERC. And so the mutual engagement would do two things: catalyze a stronger enforcement framework, and at the same time support that framework. We receive many complaints, and we're able to assist in the mutual investigation, synthesization, and streamlining of these complaints, identifying which ones require further regulatory action and penalty. And I believe that that work that we do together will result in a stronger consequence management framework, and that would also be a deterrent to others.
I would ask you, in your assessment, because you received some of these comments, petitions, if I can call it petitions, how well are Nigerians taking advantage of the of all of the goodies that they should get from the FCCPC? How well enlightened and exposed are Nigerians? Are they taking advantage of your commission?
Well, I mean, I still hear, recently I still heard someone say that I've never heard of the FCCPC. And so, are we optimal? My answer to that is no, we're not. But today, more than ever before, Nigerians are taking advantage of the channels provided by the FCCPC. We're receiving far more complaints than ever before, whether it's respect to electricity or other services or goods produced. And that might be an indication of how bad the market is. It might very well be, but it's also an unequivocal indication that Nigerians are becoming more demanding and recognizing, or at least demonstrating confidence in the channels, the regulatory channels for enforcing their rights. So I'd say that Nigerians are more aware today than they were of their rights. They are taking advantage of the remedy mechanisms and certainly demanding more from service providers and those who sell things to them. And so that's an indication of improvement.
Though I'm going to talk about this on the second half of the show, but comments coming in immediately, people knew you were going to be on this show today, was how you react to what happened with the downstream of the petroleum industry. That's the adulterated products and the effect on Nigerians. They want you to react to that. What are you doing? Yes, we've gotten press releases, a lot of statements from you, but what is really happening with regards to that?
Good. So what it is that when we became aware, we immediately attempted to triage the problem, which is a typical thing in trying to solve a problem of that magnitude. And so we've engaged the NNPC, we've engaged the midstream and downstream regulatory authority on where things are, what the problems are, the contingency plans to address the disruption, the containment plans to ensure appropriate recall, and then the framework to address consumer complaints, and finally the steps taken to prevent a reoccurrence. And I can report back that we're satisfied with progress on a lot of these heads. I think the one piece that still seems somewhat inchoate is a remedy framework for legitimate and demonstrated injury. And we're engaging on that. The primary framework seems to have worked well. The primary framework being that consumers who have experienced injury or damage to their vehicles or their equipment are able to return to the retailers, at least as an initial starting point. A lot of the injuries have been resolved at that point, but some have not. And it's that secondary mechanism that we are working on with the legal departments of both the regulator and the NNPC. And in the coming days, the framework will become more robust, and then it will be available to consumers for them to express their dissatisfaction and provide evidence of it.
Because I saw in the news today, many are already talking about compensation, and you know, it's really heightening at the moment. People are talking about that as the Nigerians continue to count losses. Now, let me also stay with the downstream before I go back to the NERC and FCCPC's partnership. There's also been issues before now of complaining about under dispensing and some other issues, some other sharp practices. How has the FCCPC also tackled this, particularly with regards to petroleum products and other products, not even only petroleum products?
Good. And so, indeed, there are overlapping responsibilities and mandate with other agencies, and we take the view that the most effective and efficient approach to succeeding is to engage in a resource allocation that recognizes where expertise and capacity is best. And so what you're talking about is a weights and measures issue, and it is an existential problem. There are weights and measures enforcement apparatus within the midstream and downstream regulatory authority. There are weights and measures enforcement capabilities within the standard setter, who is responsible for metrology in the country, which is the Standards Organization of Nigeria. Weights and measures enforcement capabilities in the specialized, dedicated weights and measures office of the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. And yes, we do have some responsibility for weights and measures. But in this particular instance, what we believe is the best allocation of our resource is catalyzing the other regulators that I've identified, cooperating with them and supporting them in ensuring that that there's a better oversight with spot checks and other enforcement mechanisms to ensure that this is occurring. And although we've had previous conversations, but enforcement mechanisms are stronger in the discussions that are going on now.
I'm also looking at strengthening capacity of your men, because when we look at the FCCPC, what's the coverage like, so that we understand how well you can, you know, attend to all of these complaints? A country of more than 200 million people, how does it work?
It's quite a job. You're talking about a total staff strength of under 240 people in just 9 offices responsible for a country as vast as Nigeria, with 774 local government areas and approximately 200 million people. And so the way we do our work is quite diverse. It's cooperating with other agencies, and especially when you think that oversight cuts across everything, all services, all products. And so we're always cooperating with other people. In food and drug, we work very closely with NAFDAC. We have an MoU with them. In standards, we work very closely with SON. And just like you've seen in NERC, we work in electricity, we work with NERC. And that's the case from industry to industry. And that cooperation is very vital to how we do our work. Another tool we use is to use our channels to transparently show what our work is. So sometimes when we put out something or we penalize someone, we would announce it, not just for the news value of it, but it's more a regulatory tool so that others know. There's absolutely no way that we're ever going to be able to go to every nook and cranny and address inappropriate conduct every step of the way. But the stronger the consequence mechanisms are, the more responsible we hold, or the more accountable we hold businesses to their responsibility to the people they provide services or goods to, the more I believe that there'll be a deterrent to others from behaving inappropriately.
Now, almost finally, EVC, the major issues, again, like I said earlier, about the electricity sector is metering, billings, and all of that. We've seen efforts by government to bridge the metering gap. What do you think? How well can we get this right so that we can at least reduce the same set of complaints that keep coming, even at town halls and all that you put together? What's the update with regards to metering and all of that? Are we getting there?
And so we followed the progress from the government's contribution to the process, and obviously the periodic reports from the DISCOs about how hard they are working to close the metering gap, and how they say that the billing system and the tariff system needs to be more reflective in order to address what the deficits are. I think they need to be incentivized. I think the DISCOs need to be incentivized a lot more to close the metering gap. But I have a more radical approach to what the incentivization is. I encourage the current incentivization, supporting them, and the government subsidizing the process. But I think a very important incentive is to make metering far more profitable than estimated billing. And so I think that we need to certainly be more radical and demonstrate a lot more will in capping estimated billing, enforcing the cap and penalizing violations, so that the DISCOs can look at and say, you know what, we don't even make any money unless people are paying their bills, their metered bills. That way they will be encouraged to meter people far more, to the extent that the estimated billing can provide sufficient backup in the absence of metering, or sadly sometimes even provide better margins than metering. I don't think that we're going to close that gap as quickly as we possibly can.
Finally, EVC, what should we expect from the FCCPC moving on in 2022? A lot of challenges, I know, but what should Nigerians expect, both besides the electricity sector, all that has to do with consumer protection?
And there are two things. What to expect is we will continue to walk what really is a difficult balance of recognizing and providing some level of understanding to companies about the moving dynamics of operating in the environment and all factors considered. We understand that the dynamics are such that it could sometimes be quite difficult to operate. And we will, while we understand that, we will balance that against what we consider the unequivocal rights and indisputable mandate to protect consumers. And so that said, there will be stronger enforcement. There will be certainly more vigilance, especially in the competition space. And we will hold service providers and goods producers far more accountable than ever before. So we would understand what their problems are, but we will not equivocate on ensuring that consumers are not hitting their pocketbooks in a manner that they should not be.
I must thank you so much for your time joining us this Monday afternoon. I've been speaking to the Executive Vice Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, Mr. Babatunde Irukera, live from our Abuja studios. Thank you so much, and do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.